Technically live. Our lovely viewership can't see us right now, and we're working on it. Okay. I'll check that out. Feck. Man, I'm on point today. The capture is actually spot on. I just need to flipsy reversey myself. And Graphite, thank you for throwing in 100. Look at this. There we go. Haha. Right. So, ladies, gentlemen, and individuals of all persuasions, it is my esteemed pleasure to finally introduce you to Ollie Barder. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Lovely. Oh, now, I am probably going to do a very poor job of introducing you, good sir, because I became aware of your work from Mecha.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
So that was kind of, it was a weird journey for me discovering the other parts of your work. So would you mind introducing yourself to these lovely, lovely people?
Okay, my name's Ollie Barder. I am my main job is that of a game designer. Worked on a bunch of games over the years, most notably things like Gears of War, Judgment, and Fortnite, Epic Games. Parallel to that, I've also been a games journalist, anime journalist, and I've written for a bunch of outlets and such as The Guardian, Kotaku, The Escapist, Eurogamer. These days I write mostly for Forbes. I'm living and working in Tokyo. My current job is as a creative director at Solar Digital Arts, working on a variety of anime and gaming projects. I also write toy reviews for HobbyLink TV, mostly of the Mecha type toys. I've also been legal consultant regarding Mecha properties and all sorts of other stuff. That's kind of it, really. Yeah. My main specialty, as you've kind of already sort of elucidated on, is Mecha.
Yes.
So, but Mecha games is kind of where it started for me, and then realizing that everything's kind of interconnected. So anime toys, bit of kits, but mostly toys. So
yes. Also, as a small aside, dear viewers, in the 2 minutes while I was panicking to get everything working and set up, we were basically playing Spot the Kits. We talk about like Gundam Penelope and the Verkar unicorn and everything. So, yeah, Ollie, welcome to the show. Now,
Thanks.
friendos, if you have any questions for Ollie, write them down, store them. We'll do question and answers later on in the show.
Yeah.
Because, well, and I know the initial pitch that I had was a little bit baity for this conversation, because originally, friends, I pitched the frankly at this point gauche topic of Mecha games are dead, which you've never had to hear that conversation topic before.
No, I mean it's also been currently like the whole meme at the moment is Mecha anime is dead or Mecha is dead or whatever this stuff, and it comes from like a really specific source of people that all run this very weird sort of like consultancy in Tokyo, and it kind of like they're trying to kind of make out that there's a problem so that they're the ones that can fix it. So it's an old kind of bait and switch thing where you say that there's a big issue, and then because you're the one bringing it up, then the people say, oh, what's the problem? And you kind of lure them in, and then you set up to fix it. And the reason why they want it is because Mecha is far from dead. In fact, it's unbelievably lucrative. And they want in on it because it's the thing about Mecha anime and games and toys is that it's a very storied, complex genre, and it's got very, there's a lot going on, and you can't just sort of walk into it like you can necessarily with other genres. And it's also very specifically Japanese in some ways. So I think, a lot of people have always been on the outside, not because it's not inherently inclusive, but it requires a great deal of work and understanding to kind of get into it.
Yes.
And a lot of them can't be bothered. I think it's mostly, and now they're kind of realizing the oversight, that they've kind of cornered all the other anime and other genres and all this kind of stuff, but this big, huge, juicy, money-making genre is not theirs for the taking yet. So I think a lot of it is to do with that. There's been a massive shift in the past 5 years alone, especially with anime, where, the availability of like classic mecha is just, it's everywhere now. And stuff that I thought that was, stuff I grew up watching fan subs with is like available on Blu-ray, and stuff that I never thought I'd ever see in my, human lifetime is now available for, ready consumption. So there's been a massive change. The only thing I think that the big notable absence in terms of mecha games in the past, let's say 7-8 years, really is basically Armored Core. That's kind of the only kind of real absence, because the last game we had was back in 2013, and before that it was literally a yearly release from 1997.
The only thing that I can really talk about with any, I don't want to say authority, is how we have giant robot games in English-speaking territories. So, like, I will admit, somewhat envious of you being based out of Tokyo, because, friends, the sheer number of giant robot games that we don't get access to in... Okay, so you know how sometimes you have an idea for an interview where it's got like a nice structure and you're going to lead up to it? What we've done is, in that very, very obtuse manner, we've just smashed the doors in and we're getting right into the meat. Because the reason why I'd pitched to Ollie, giant robot games are dead, discuss, is because they aren't. We just don't get to see a lot of them. Over here in English-speaking territories, we get a handful of Gundam titles which come over. And a lot of the rest are kind of swept away. Even some of the really good Gundam titles.
Yes.
And on top of that, the purely like English territory properties we've had. We get Battletech and Battletech. Because everyone else is keeled over. I mean, we discuss Titanfall 2 a lot when this comes up, but that ends up being a conversation about EA's internal politics, which, friends, we have talked more than enough about today. So, yeah, essentially, we're jumping into the meat of this conversation, which is there are so many cracking games that we're not seeing. And as you were saying, aside from Armored Core, and the developers of Armored Core have made another little game series you might have heard of. It's a something Souls? I forget.
Something Souls, yeah. That's a bane of my life. Well, I love the games because I love Kingsfield and Shadow Tower, which are kind of the functional precursors to Demon Souls. I actually like Demon Souls the most. So the new remake I really love, but it just makes me depressed to think that all the amazing mecha games they used to make have just kind of disappeared. Yeah. In recent years, we've had a few more mecha games. So, the thing you mentioned about Gundam games not being released properly. So, things like Gundam Side Stories never got properly released. Gundam 0081, that never got released. So, basically, a lot of the PlayStation 3 era games. So, Gundam Extreme Versus Full Boost, that never got released. We finally got Gundam Extreme Versus Maxi Boost on PlayStation 4, which is amazing.
Yep.
And we've got a few other bits and bobs like the Metal Wolf Chaos remake. But a lot of this stuff doesn't really make its way westward. So things like the older Another Century episode games. That was a licensing nightmare. However, in recent years, we have got things like Super Robot Wars given English language releases, which I actually think is fascinating because they found a loophole where they can release it in Asia with an English language localization, which means they don't have to worry about all the licensing nightmares. And what's interesting about that is because they released Super Robot Wars V, X, and T, and T is by far and away the best-selling one ever. And what was interesting about the sales for T is they actually sold more outside of Japan than they did in.
Interesting.
So, and that's a first for the series.
Just to bring everybody on board. So, firstly, Smallest Waffle, hello. Secondly, the licensing nightmare that we're talking about is Gundam especially is kind of like, I want to say kind of like old school Marvel and DC in the sense that different parts of the Gundam universe are licensed to a ton of different companies and different ways. So this company might have, I'm pulling examples out of my arse, but this company over here might have War in the Pocket, which comes with certain mechs, and they might be licensed to just make games of that. But another company might have the Universal Century War, which includes War in the Pocket, but kind of And so when you have games like Super Robot Wars, which is, what if all giant robots thrown together, then it can turn into a licensing mess.
Yeah. So the way they get around that is that in Japan, Bandai is sort of incorporated with lots of these series in general in terms of toys and model kits. But because like the international rights are not, very clear for things like, I don't know, Leisner or Dumbine or what else? Just looking around me at the moment. Things like Tekkaman Blade or Elgime or, stuff like this, or Dan Cougar. I mean, those are all very different series. So the licensing for that in the States would need to be, in the States and in Europe would need to be sorted out. And it's just nightmarish. So the way that Bandai Namco figured a way around it was, instead of releasing it in like officially as a Western release, they released it in Asia with an English localization. And because the games are region free, everyone just imports them.
Yeah.
And it's a really elegant workaround. I mean, talking about Souls, that's actually kind of how Demon Souls became so popular, was because it was got an Asian release, which was English localized, and so all these kind of hipster importers went, "Yeah, I've imported this game that's completely in English," and then they thought they discovered this amazing. They thought they discovered this amazing new game. I mean, it's still a great game.
Oh yes,
it's just the way. It's. I just find it really funny that because they thought that they would be, importers, that they got really excited about it. So I think that's kind of what Bandai Namco now is kind of capitalizing on. So, and the Super Robot Wars, Super Robot Wars T is fantastic. So,
sorry, if you're not familiar with Super Robot Wars, it's a tactics turn-based RPG, but it features giant robots from across a bunch of different Japanese properties. So it's not just like it's not just a little Gundam smoothie. It's got I just go with everyone. It's a much easier thing. Also, jumping back to your previous topic, the Gundam Burst Fighter. Is it Gundam Burst Fighter? The PS4
No. Gundam Extreme versus Maxi Boost On.
That memorable title. I'm actually saving that.
Titles are bonkers, though.
Yeah. They're getting to be light novel level. I'm actually saving that one for when we can hang out with people in the real. I'm going to do a blind tournament of it. Let people pick their robots with no knowledge and see how it translates.
Oh, that'll be interesting, actually, because that's a really... Because those games are actually... it's kind of interesting because like the barrier to entry is really low in terms of like the functionality, but getting good at it, that takes such a long time. So that's kind of... to be honest, there's actually almost no ceiling with that. It's kind of amazing. The only thing to kind of clarify is because Gundam Extras Maxi Boost On was released on PlayStation 4. There is another Gundam Versus game that was released before that, which was actually kind of the precursor for some of the stuff that's happening in the Japanese arcades now. And that's a different... It's based on the Gundam Extreme Versus games, but it's kind of it's a bit slower. It doesn't have as many of the roster. And Gundam Extreme versus Maxi Boost On, Jesus, too long.
Right.
That is actually the fourth iteration of Gundam Extreme Versus in the Japanese arcades, and it is by far and away the most balanced and the one that is used primarily in tournaments, because it went Gundam Extreme versus Gundam Extreme versus Full Boost, Gundam Extreme versus Maxi Boost, and then Maxi Boost On, which is basically online. So when you go into the arcades in Japan, even if there's no one else there, when you hit play, you're always going to be playing against another person if you want. So that was kind of mind-blowing to play that kind of game, but with the online segment. But the PlayStation 4 port is supremely nice, and it's got a whole new mission mode which is not in the arcade version.
That's lovely.
Which is massive.
So I know we said no, it's all good. I know we said we were going to do questions from the crowd later on, but you know what? Utopia Heart put like a kind of a classic question, and I think this might be real good just for giving people grounding of how you got to where you are and a bit more frame of reference, because honestly, friends, I could just talk obscure Gundam games from now until the sun blots out. But Utopia Heart wants to ask, how did you find mechs? Was it something you stumbled upon? Was it something you were exposed to? Like, how did you get into this sphere? almost like a TLDR, the journey of Ollie so far.
Well, I mean, with anime, okay, it started with anime, kind of. So, I mean, the first thing I really got into when it was in the UK was Macross Plus.
Yeah.
That was kind of, that started me off in the 90s. And then games-wise, I was introduced to Virtualon in the arcades in the UK. And that's kind of how I got into mecha games. And I actually started up because very few people knew how to play it back in the 90s. So we actually started up a club in London, the London Virtualon Club. And that's how we all got to play. And because of that, the arcade that we had it in, which I think was called Namco Wonder Park, which is now some kind of pub. Namco Wonder Park. And it was an amazing arcade, actually. But Namco Wonder Park actually had, was the first and the only arcade in Britain to have Virtual Oratorio Tangram. So that was, we actually played that before anywhere else, and that was amazing. And then from that, sorry.
As an FYI, Virtuon, like this cracking robot kind of 3D brawler with this incredibly bizarre dual flight stick,
twin stick
fighting game. It was glorious. The sequel, which was Dreamcast, sadly did not see a proper. Wait, the sequel was Dreamcast, and it didn't see a worldwide release, which. For those of us,
it got a weird American release.
For those of us Saturn fans, was a heartbreaker. That's what I built yesterday. It was fucking great.
Yeah, but no, they released Virtualon on the Saturn globally, but they didn't. The Dreamcast one kind of got a very funny English localization, weirdly by Activision, not by Sega. But it never got given a European release. So, like in the UK, like being able to play that game. Like, even before the Dreamcast came out, it was, like, mind-blowing, so...
Yeah. So, okay, so, it's the Namco pub. You have an underground Virtuon League. Like,
in the 90s.
Yeah, how does that drop one in Tokyo surrounded by, I'm going to go ahead and guess, all giant robot figures?
Yeah, there's about a couple of hundred in front of me. It's a bit crazy. So that's kind of a long trip. So like after Virtual, I kind of got into Armored Core a lot, and then things like Omega Boost, which I loved. So basically, the trend with like Macross Plus, Armored Core, and Omega Boost is that all of the mecha in that are designed by a guy called Shoji Kawamori, who was like one of the main creators behind Macross, which is kind of weirdly known as Robotech abroad. But yeah, after that, I mean, I kind of moved into game testing and worked my way up through the industry from design to senior designer to game director to creative director. And yeah, so, I mean, I've been working at lots of different companies. I worked in Poland for a bit with the guys at People Can Fly, who are amazing.
Oh, nice.
Because, the new Outriders, I cannot wait to play that. Because all the guys I used to work with are just amazing guys. So to see that they're doing practically like a launch title for PS5 is amazing. And then I ended up back in Japan. And yeah, it's kind of been weird. I mean, I didn't plan to end up where I am doing what I'm doing. It just I just worked and it did happen eventually. So it's kind of a weird way of explaining it. But yeah.
I mean, it's all good. It's all good. I guess it's more of a fluffy question. When did you realise you were the go-to person for giant robot banter? Just throwing in another fluffy question. Was there a moment where you kind of looked around and went, wait, no one else is talking about this?
There was a bit of that, actually. I felt like there was all these amazing games that were coming out and nobody talking about them at all, and I just didn't understand why people weren't interested. And like you said, they had a very kind of parochial view of things like maybe just BattleTech or Heavy Gear, and they didn't really see beyond that. I mean, I love BattleTech and I love Heavy Gear and I love MechWarrior, but and love Titanfall, but there are lots of other games as well, and I think it's more about it's really interesting to understand where BattleTech comes from and where Heavy Gear comes from, because the origins are actually Japanese. And a lot of Western mecha design work, people which think of being like realistic mecha, like where they come from is a really specific Japanese origin point. So when people say they like realistic mecha, what they're actually saying is I actually like a very specific type of 80s Japanese mecha, which is kind of really interesting. So, but
I know exactly the series, and I was looking at some kits of it this morning, and it's dropped out of my head. It is the big, bulky, with the hatch over, the three-eyed, the something dogs.
Scope dogs.
Yes.
The Votoms, yeah. So basically, BattleTech primarily... Okay, so BattleTech uses designs...
Here we go, friends. This is why I wanted Ollie on the show. Exactly this.
So the original BattleTech story and setting used mecha designs from Macross, Crusher Joe, and most interestingly of all, Dugram. Now, Dugram, or Fang of the Sun Dugram, basically the mecha for that, cockpits in the head, hard points, very kind of believable, realistic mecha. They don't have like a mecha head. Like the head of the Dugram actually is... it's actually like an Apache helicopter. Actually, wait a second. I'll just grab one from behind the... There we go.
Bring the props in, dude.
This is the Dugram. So you've got like this funky head, which is like an Apache helicopter's, cockpit. This is actually the Shadow Hawk in BattleTech, by the way. They just copied the design straight. So this is the other thing about... So in BattleTech, they just copied the designs and then gave them new names, causing all sorts of licensing issues for both BattleTech and MechWarrior. But the origins for these designs are actually... You can like point to literally who these designs were done by. So in this case, Kunio Kawara for like Dugram and all this kind of lot. And then for Heavy Gear, the influence for that was very much as... you said was like Scope Dogs, which are the main mecha from Votoms. And those are much smaller, so they're about 4 or 5 meters tall. They've got wheels in the feet. So anyone that's played Heavy Gear understands, hang on a second, that sounds very familiar. Yep. And but the thing about Heavy Gear that was, I would say, was arguably more classy was they didn't just copy the designs and then rename them. They actually used the Scope Dog as kind of like a functional basis. And then they used the functionality of that mecha to design their own mecha. So you can see the functional origins. But it's not like a straight copy, so I think that's classier. But the interesting thing about Heavy Gear is like super influential. I mean, we wouldn't have, Titanfall if we hadn't had Heavy Gear or BattleTech or MechWarrior. So, I mean, that lineage is still there. So also, I just find it really interesting.
It's also worth saying just very quickly for the crowd, like Heavy Gear did attempt to return to us, and is currently stuck in legal hell.
Oh yes.
There was a Canadian publisher who was bought by a big company, and they were working on the Heavy Gear spiritual, the Heavy Gear reboot that was initially
Heavy Gear Arena.
Yes. It's currently just stuck in hell. There was another platform that announced that it was going to be released, and then there was a counter PR statement saying that company didn't actually have the rights to and even announce it. And so it's just been stuck in legal hell. Okay, you know what? If we see fun questions, we'll throw them in. If I don't answer your questions, dear friends, please either save them or act Viking Blonde in chat. Because Wandering's asking if you've ever had to watch the BattleTech TV show.
Oh my God, yes. Yes. The animation in that is appalling.
It's so bad.
Yeah, but it's weirdly very faithful to the novels. So don't get me wrong, I do love all the BattleTech backstory with the clans and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is I enjoy it and it's really good. But if you've watched Dugram, it's like, hang on a second, they're just taking the whole setting and just copying and pasting. It's not just the design. So, I mean, the reason why I was kind of talking about Dugram and Votoms, and they're kind of an interesting series, is because the guy that made that, or wrote and directed it, was a guy called Rosky Takahashi, and he is probably one of the most influential sort of mecha anime creators when it comes to games, because even though his anime was never released abroad, the guys that made Heavy Gear had already seen Votoms, and the people that made BattleTech obviously knew what Dugram was. So even though those anime had never been officially released in the West, people basically got hold of it. But the BattleTech anime series was not good. Or animation series.
We actually sat down.
Okay, the story was good, but
we sat down with a bunch of people who had never seen it. Some who'd never even seen BattleTech, including Fiona, my lovely partner, who now has haunting dreams about the introduction of. It was the formation of the clan Steiner.
I mean, it's really faithful to the story, but the way they did it was just so.
I'll tell you,
appalling.
Get half a bottle of gin in, it gets better. Gets better.
Yeah, but that's true of most things. Get half a bottle of gin and everything improves.
Okay, so the thing is, we're only like we're only like 20 minutes in, and we actually hit upon the big thing that I wanted to get you talking about, which was like why we aren't seeing these games come over, which is the licensing nightmare. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit because you have a unique perspective on giant robot stuff that none of us have, which is both having a grounding in game dev and being immersed in the region that has the highest demand for giant robot stuff. So
yeah.
As an individual we'll count the cool zone and the current lockdown out of it, but before lockdown, could you give us a little grounding in how much of an effect giant robots have in Japan?
Right.
I know that's a very general question, but like
no. I mean, but it's a good point because like I suppose outside of Japan you don't really see much stuff, but in Japan we have things like all the main tech stores that you go, which are called like Labby or Bit Camera or Yodobashi Camera. These are like big like department stores for like cameras and technology where you buy TVs, and they normally have like a toy floor, and the toy floor has stuff for kids and everyone, and then they have this enormous section for Gunpla and Mecha model kits and Mecha toys, and one of the ones near me in Shibuya has actually massively. Yeah, I know, it's lovely.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I was like, I can't imagine why they'd have one of those.
And but they've got this, and they've actually increased the size of the one in one near me to actually include more Mecha toys and Mecha. So basically, pretty much everywhere you can go to one of these places, and there'll be an entire floor full of Gunpla and toys, and you also have all of this licensing stuff going on as well. So a lot of pachinko places. Pachinko is kind of like a very specific Japanese. It's not really an arcade game. It's got little ball bearings, but those have a lot of like Gundam tie-ins. There's Macross tie-ins, and so you get a lot of crossover with that. There's lots of licensing material in cross everything. So it's like very difficult to be in Japan, and it's like you imagine how Pokemon is everywhere. Pokemon is everywhere in Japan, but then so is Gundam, so is Macross. So is Dumbine, weirdly, which is like I don't understand how Dumbine is this weird thing at the moment.
I wasn't expecting.
No, I mean apparently, according to people I know, the Dumbine toys from Bandai at the moment are some of the best selling ever, and that's for like a series of like 1982. But they're really lovely. But anyway, so it's things like that, and then you've got things like giant, statues of like Gundams and a Gundam that walks, kind of. And
sorry,
and then
if you
have
haven't
these...
seen it, they made a 1-to-1 scale of the OG Granddaddy, the 78-2 that moves initially to be. It was going to herald in the Olympics, if I remember rightly, but
correct.
The cool zone interfered with all of that. So
yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, but I think the best way to describe it is much in the same way that you see things like, I don't know, Pokemon everywhere, in the West.
Yeah.
You see that as well, but it's like there's Mecha everywhere as well. And it's just toys. I mean, there's a lot of new toys being released of really classic designs that are incredibly expensive. And there's a lot of new Mecha anime that's being made as well. So it's just part of the background culture, in the same way that I suppose like Star Wars or Star Trek is. It's just there, and I think that's one of the biggest things that it really strikes you. And also if you go into the arcades, which still exist, there are loads of Mecha games there too. So it's just everywhere. I think is the best description. It's very difficult to ignore it, to be honest.
Sorry, Baron Sheep is a very good friend of mine. He ran a giant robot themed tabletop campaign for us,
Oh, lovely.
And we even got to having our own little like mech tournaments where these lovely lot would create teams and call in. And initially, Baron and I had pretended we were going to be shoutcasters for this fake future, the Balu Bowl, the yearly like competitive tournament. And we ended up just getting too excited and just yelling a lot. It was good fun. It was good fun. Sorry. Baron, how are you doing? To those of you just joined us, we're here with Ollie Barder, who is... I've been saying the go-to person for talking giant robots, games industry side. And I didn't want to say, like... I didn't want to put myself on too aggrandizing a pose, because I've never worked on a giant robot title, or I haven't even had the chance to do a Japan visit yet, because I worked for Sega for a while, and why would Sega fly someone from the UK when it's in their backyard? You know what I mean?
Was that in Chiswick? Was that the...
Oh, see,
the Sega office?
I cut my teeth at Chiswick before moving down to Creative Assembly.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I was over by good old Gunnersbury in that great big grey open office.
Yeah.
It was good.
No, because I lived over the bridge in Kew, so...
Oh, nice!
And I worked in Guildford for a while, so... Guildford and London. I mean, I worked at Disney for a bit too, so I've had a bit of a strange career.
Mine, I cut my teeth at Lionhead, then there was a big old gap before I ended up at Sega. So it just all it took was a little bit of a recession to get me back. But that's another story.
I mean, what was it? I mean, Lionhead's in the research park, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the place which has only got one entrance and exit. So that when everybody left at the end of the day, you might as well spend 3 hours just trying to escape, which is bonkers.
It is, but it made for a great reason to go to the pub.
Yes.
Like, end of the day, you could sit there and wait for all the buses and cars to all get stuck as they're trying to leave. Just go for a pint.
Yeah. No, I worked in Guildford for a while. I thankfully never had to work in the research park, so I never got to see that. But friends did, and they always used to tell me it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So...
Oh, and that is our dog defending the house from the post people. That's River.
That's lovely.
She is an adorable cuddle dog with a big girl balk. So she sounds like she's me. Okay, so Utopia Heart and Varbles were talking about the things you were mentioning earlier. The well, not copyright so much, but more like the licensing loopholes.
So the licensing stuff with BattleTech is a specific thing because of the origins of... I mean, they're called the Unseen now, the Mecha that were originally copied. And those are an issue because of the people that originally owned them, obviously. Yes. With Heavy Gear, that's a different thing because they never copied the designs. But like you said, there are two companies now that are in kind of battle over who owns the rights.
Yes.
And with Titanfall, I mean, that's just... EA's just given up on it by the looks of it, which is sad.
Well, I mean, like I said, we've talked a lot today about EA, considering how they've been, the BioWare news from earlier today, we talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the rumours were that there was a lot of internal politics going on around Titanfall, which is why they made it lockstep with the Battlefield releases, essentially trying to, maybe not self-sabotage, but trying to get rid of Respawn. And the success of Apex
Legends. Which is
Legends.
weird.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I had a thought, but it dropped right out of my head. Well done,
No.
Will.
I mean, I actually worked... I mean, one of the first jobs I had was I worked at EA in testing, and that was a very enlightening experience. But the EA I worked at compared to what EA is now is a very different beast. So, and I've actually... Well, one of my friends was one of the guys... who designed BT, was it 7274, the Mecca in Titanfall 2.
Oh, nice.
And he was at Respawn. And from his standpoint, everything was, hunky-dory. So he never saw any of the politics outside. He's super knowledgeable about Mecca as well, which is great. I mean, that's one of the tricky things is when you want to like make Mecha games, you can't do it with people that aren't knowledgeable.
Yes.
Not only about the games, but also like kind of the design origins, because with mecha design it's kind of a unique problem because you're making a fictional vehicle that doesn't exist.
Yes.
Which means that you're a kind. So this is where I get nerdy, but
oh no, mate, that's why you're here. Bring the fucking thunder. You know.
So with game design, you're effectively a game is you're making an abstract rule set. So you're making a rule set that can't exist in the real world. And with a mecha, that's an abstract rule set within an abstract rule set. So the game itself is an abstract rule set, but the mecha itself, because it's a fictional vehicle and form follows function and necessarily what it does is what it looks like, that means that you've got this double abstraction, which from a gameplay standpoint is fascinating. And one of the reasons I enjoy these games so much is because they're so crunchy in terms of a low level game design stuff, specifically like functionality, how it works. But the problem with mecha design and mecha games is that you need to understand what your game or your mecha can do before you design them. Otherwise, you're not going to get the messaging like this is how its weapons work or this is how it moves. And so this kind of stuff about the designing the mecha is actually really important, and very few people have a good kind of historical. I mean, they don't. So when you start talking about it, it needs like
to throw in an example. One of my, admittedly, I enjoyed the game a lot, but I found that Phantom Crash and Steel Lancer Arena International was a very good example of not being able to convey the weight, not being able to convey the function through the form. After you've played it a bit, you can get, okay, they're kind of on wheels, jumpy robot, two, I guess. But to look at them, their form's not conveyed. And the gameplay is very light, very fast, whereas it doesn't have the weight to it. Kind of feels like a Matchbox setup. The other thing I wanted to add very quickly on that one is for the need for knowledgeable designers when it comes to mech titles, is it's very easy to fall into similar designs because of the train of thought. You see a lot of mechs from original IPs that fall into very similar steps because they do alright, we're going to start with a tank and we're going to make it bipedal. How does that work? And I'm not saying that everyone comes to the same conclusion, but you see a lot of similarities in that design.
They're coming from the same origin. This is the problem.
Yeah.
And you end up with stuff that actually plays very generically and in a way that is the biggest crime normally is that it feels like someone wearing a robot suit.
Yes.
It's not actually a vehicle. And one of the reasons I think Phantom Crash didn't quite gel so well was because the mecha in that are actually remote controlled.
Yeah.
So they're actually very, very light. And because they don't have a pilot, they don't have the heft to them. Because obviously if you have a pilot, you then have to kind of look after the internal mechanics of how all that works.
Although, as a smaller side, friends, it did have one of my favourite features, which is you choose an animal co-pilot who hangs out with you that works both your targeting computer and your friend.
Yes.
That should be a feature in everything.
Phantom Crash was awesome.
Yeah.
No, the setting of Phantom Crash was fantastic, actually. And SLAI. So that was all right. But no, I mean, it's I mean, one of the things that's really tricky with sort of generally mecha games is that I've worked on Strike Suit Zero. I came up with the original.
I didn't know you worked on Strike Suit.
Yeah, I was the original lead designer on that for 2 years. I came up with the setting, the story. I left a year before it finished because they ran out of money, and they basically messed it up massively. Not from a technical standpoint, but from a design standpoint. So basically, everything. They made all the capital ships unbelievably, powerful and difficult to kill. So everything became an escort mission, which is just the worst kind of mission you ever want to do. And then they also had this weird kind of limitation on how long you could transform for. And originally there was no limitation. It was that the whole point of Strike Suit Zero was that when you actually play a game like Ace Combat, you have this thing where you joust, where you come up against the target and then you try and get a lock on, and if you don't get a lock on, you then pass each other, and then you kind of do this whole thing where you're like trying to get the lock. You're chasing arrows around the HUD basically, and so the whole way to fix that, especially in space, because with Ace Combat you've got a horizon, so it's not so bad, but in space there's no horizon. So how do you fix this problem where you're just doing this, chasing this, these arrows? So I suggested, well, instead of just doing this you can then transform, and then your controls act like this, so that breaks the joust, which means that space combat for you becomes a lot more versatile and interesting. And the entire game was kind of based around these two modes, which was the fighter mode and the strike suit mode. And I brought on the mecha designer for that, who was a lovely, lovely guy called Junji Okubo, who designed all the original mecha for the first Steel Battalion, the one with the crazy controller. He's an amazing guy, and he's one of the best industrial mecha designers probably in the world right now.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the interruption and the fact that this conversation is going to go in like 5 different ways. One, please, next time you're next time you're hanging out with him, pass him a love from all of us here. Like, Steel Battalion 1 is something that like we as a group end up talking about constantly. The other, I just had a weird thought. Were you at the original Resd with Strike Suit Zero, or had you left before then?
No, I'd left. So I left in. I started developing on it in 2009. I left at the end of 2011, and then it was, so I left at the beginning of 2012, and then it was released in 2013. And by that point, I was actually working on Gears of War. Because I'd left and gone to Gears of War, and they'd run out of money, and then the final game just wasn't. I mean, parts of it were all the stuff that I worked on, like the whole way that the controls changed between fighter and strike suit, and yeah, I mean, I wrote a lot of the story with another guy called Michael Bunning, who's really great. And then they released the director's cut, but it's kind of weird because I never worked on that. And the director's cut weirdly plays worse than the original game, and I don't know how that was possible.
Oh no.
So, but anyway, I didn't work on that. I didn't work on it. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have met you then. So because I did like all the foundation design and everything for it, and then left. So, which was pretty heartbreaking because that's something I poured a lot of passion and time into, and things I care a great deal about. But that unfortunately happens a lot in game development. I mean, there are so many. I mean, I'm credited on a fair bunch of games, but there's a bunch of games that. I mean, I've worked on more games that have never been released than games that have been. So but that's just the nature of the industry, sadly.
Lamentably,
it's a real waste.
There's a bunch of titles that will never even be known about that I worked on that I occasionally just sadly think about with a glass of scotch. But the thing I wanted to jump back on was that, especially if you are, I guess this is for everyone, because Ollie, this is something that you'll know, but like if you're working on a giant robot title for an English-speaking audience, you're coming at it from a passion project, because this was one of the things that we've already solved it in this conversation, but one of the things I was going to say to you was that like giant robot games, for the most part, don't sell comparable to their interest in English language territories. And
that is changing slightly, though.
It is,
but you're
is.
Right.
But with things like MechWarrior Online and I'm gonna evoke Hawkin. I feel like Hawkin had a really hard run of it.
Yeah.
But there isn't an example that you can go to the money men. So, friends, you can't go to like Mr. Moneybags and go, we want to make a giant robot game, and they'll be like, of course, it's going to make us all the money. Please, have this dump truck full of cash. They're going to be like, well, we've seen how others have fared, and we're shaky. So you'll probably have to jump through a lot more hoops to get funding or to get those hooks. And it does kind of lead on to what you were saying about how it is changing.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing there's a reason. So with Strike Suit Zero, that was originally pitched as a space combat game with Mecca. So they pitched it that because people understood combat. The problem with Mecca outside of Japan is that there isn't this kind of shared cultural foundation.
Yes.
So because of that, when a game is released, let's say when like an Armored Core game is a good example. Yes. In Japan, those games are incredibly popular. But there's a really clear functional foundation for those games to exist culturally, and people understand what these mecha are and what they're meant to do. But outside of Japan, it's kind of it's like I was talking about. It's the abstract rule set. It's too abstract. It's like I don't know what this is. I have no frame of reference. So I think the what is changing, and weirdly, it's because anime, games, and toys and Plamo, they're all interconnected. is because now that a lot more mecha anime is available, that cultural foundation is slowly building up outside of Japan, and there's now more of this kind of sort of an innate, nascent understanding of what a mecha is and what it can do. Indeed. And this is why you're seeing more games beginning to kind of percolate through. And I think that's only just going to increase as more of these series are made available and more of these games are made available. It's more about exposure over time.
I had a thought on this as well, which I don't know if I mentioned to you on email, but I know I mentioned to these lovely folks earlier, which is that because we've all been stuck indoors for like the last year and change, a lot of people, games industry wise, have been getting into Gunpla. It's a good way to pass the time. It's not quite 40k, it's not quite Lego, and it looks real cool. And I genuinely think that percolation, because you were saying about how it's not just video games, it's toys, it's anime, that the kits are also coming into that. You don't need to have
very much.
You don't need to understand which Gundam is which. You don't need to have watched the series. There's no rule set that dictates, points, costs, or power. You can just buy some Gundams.
Yes.
And the amount of industry people I see doing this means that shared Gundam knowledge is kind of bleeding into the industry.
It is, and what I find really interesting about that is that they buy stuff because it looks cool, and then they try and figure out, well, where does this fit? And then that's the gateway that kind of brings them in. And again, I've also been seeing a lot of my friends, trying the new Super Robot Wars games because they're available in English, and because those games introduce so many new mecha anime and mecha series. They then go, oh, okay, so this is what this is, and that kind of acts as a gateway. So I think Gunpla is a really good starting point, and I think it is definitely. I know a bunch of friends that are basically building it now from scratch because it just looks cool. I think also like PewDiePie has been building Gunpla for a while now, and people have been watching him, and that makes a huge difference. For example, people like that.
I may dislike him as an individual, but his involvement in that is a shot in the arm. Also, just as a quick aside, because Baron Sheep was saying they wanted EVE Online but with mechs. Sadly, there was a project that attempted to do that. The name
RF
escapes
Online
me.
was it RF Online?
I'd have to check. It was a something online.
It was probably RF Online, which was a Korean shooter, and it never really took off outside of Korea, which is a real shame.
Oh no, I want to say this was EVE Online. I'm going to search it on my phone so I don't disrupt all of you, because I remember this title and being very curious because it follows EVE's combat system as well, of like locking and... Oh, and Matt Wheaton, Watto, welcome. We're chatting with Ollie, come on in. Because I played this a bunch and unfortunately it failed to find... its feedies. It was Perpendium. Perpetium?
Oh, okay.
Which was a very interesting title. Thematically, it was fascinating because the idea was it's a portal to another world, but the portal's like pinhole sized. So they pump through nanobots that then build up robots that explore and battle. And it did okay back during the subscription model success days, but it didn't have enough of a user base to survive when the industry moved over to free to play and other things. So I actually hadn't heard of the Korean one that you were talking about, the RF Online.
Yeah, no. I think what happened with that was somebody actually bought the servers and then they ran it like an independent game for a while. But yeah, RF Online, that was, I wouldn't say it's more like EVE, it was more like WoW, but with Mecca. But more science fiction-y, obviously, because WoW's quite fantasy. But yeah, there aren't really sort of any what I would call proper Mecha MMOs.
No. And it's a logistical challenge rather than a creative one.
Yeah. It is that, really. It's
the conversation I've had drunkenly around so many GDC tables, because I want to do basically at scale. One of the things that I love about the differences of variations of mechs from different genres is how they all solve a different fictional problem. The Veritech fighter is a fast deployment, also giant robot. The battle mech is 85 tons of death that can run until its pilot starves. Like, that thing will keep going until the sun blinks out. Gundams solve a multitude of different problems in a multitude of different environments. And I'm going to pick on the touch coma in the background because that's just awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the new Robot Damashi one. That's the one from the original standalone complex, not the one from 2045, which is around here somewhere. Somewhere. I'm literally my boxes of toys, then the toys are just in front of me, and then the toys are on the shelf at the back as well.
Yeah, I'm doing my best not just to lean in and obsess, because I want to say, like, middle above, that's the Barbatus Mecha Damashi. Not Mecha Damashi. That's
no. Okay, so yeah, you're right. This is not. This is the Metal Robot Damashi.
Oh, it's so pretty. It's so pretty.
And it's the Lupus Rex. I actually reviewed this one. So, and it's got lots of. So the Mecha Robot Damashi, they're kind of. The endoskeleton uses a lot more die-cast metal, so from an articulation standpoint and balance, they're really good. So yeah, I've got a few of these. I mean, so I got the Gundam 00 Riser, the High New Gundam, which is my favorite Gundam, and yeah, so no, the Barbatos Lupus Rex.
Well, I mean, I am not a person hurting for kits. I have more behind me than I have time to build, certainly. But, sorry, that was what I was drawing up. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. And Matt, Matt Wheaton was listing a few just, like, banging properties, and hell yeah. So, Matt, we've been chatting about the impact that giant robots have in Japan, what problems they've been facing trying to come over, and where it's going from there. Now, if we're going for favourite mech designs, that's not fair. Don't make me choose between my children. Don't make me choose.
I'm not good at that. I mean, I just like too many different things, so it's just I have lots of different. Yeah, no, I can't really pick a favourite. So, there are lots of them that I like. So.
Wow, I managed to derail both of us there. Well done, Will.
Sorry. So, but no, most of the stuff I have, I mean, I'm a big Chogokin guy, so a lot of stuff with die-cast metal is a big thing for me. And a lot of the Macross stuff, because you mentioned Veritex.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of Macross Valkyries. I've got like the DX Chogokin ones. Where we go.
That's it. Again, dude, feel free to show off when it comes to the models and kits, yo.
Okay. So here we go. This is the DX Chogokin Vf1j, which is basically in Robotech. This is Rick Hunter's mecha, like the one he starts with. So in Japanese, he's Hikaru Ichijo, and this is the red and so this is the one that you actually see in the opening. Thing. And so the feet, they're like die-cast metal, chunky, and then what's amazing about this one is they've got this setup where they basically, when it transforms, there's like a metal spine normally down the back.
Yeah.
But they've figured out a way so you can disconnect it so it can actually hip twist now. Which,
nice.
Which the older toys could not do at all. So that's kind of amazing. And the guys that sort of worked on this is a really amazing toy design company called T-Rex. And they're like the go-to guys when it comes to anything complex or transformable. And they are super, super hardcore, like, mecha fans that know their stuff. But yeah, no, this is absolutely gorgeous. The detailing on this is fantastic. So this is made by Bandai. And it's roughly 1:148 scale, so it's quite big and chunky. What else?
And then
I've got... Yeah, so no, I mean, but this is like the classic one. I've also got Roy Fokker's VF1S. There we go.
And you are definitely getting a lot of compliments for that particular unit.
And this one, Roy's.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is really interesting because this is actually because there are various VF1Ss, and this is actually the TV version. And the reason you can tell is because the head is actually much more slender. In the movie version, it's a bit chunkier, and so they actually released the movie version, which I've got at work, And I bought. They're sneaky though, because you had to buy the main Valkyrie, and then the super packs or the strike packs, they're sold separately. And to make it even more cunning, the super packs for the TV version of the VF1S are a slightly different color, so you can't use the movie ones.
Of course,
so you have to buy. You have to buy. So I've got the super packs kicking around back there. But yeah, I just like him as his regular Batroid mode. And these are gorgeous. I mean, the detail again. This is T-Rex, the design company that does it for Bandai. And yeah, when I actually, because this was released that's another thing is I can walk into a shop and buy these, which kind of blows my mind. Because growing up, I was not able to. I had to import everything. And when this got released, because this got released really recently, I was waiting outside, and this whole queue started to build up behind me. And this is just at my local Labby. And I was like, what? Why is everyone queuing? It's like, what? And then everybody wanted one of these.
Oh, that's
And there was about 20, 30 people. And then when the doors opened, we ran because they only had a limited stock. So this sold out crazy quickly. I couldn't order it on Amazon because it was just sold out completely. So the only way you could do it, I had to go down to my local shop and actually pick it up, in person. But no, I love these a lot. So
as a smaller side,
these are lovely toys.
They're so cool. As a smaller side, I'm lucky because in Seattle we've got a dedicated Gunpla store.
Nice.
And it's a locally run one, so you get to go in there and just be like, ooh. Matt Wheaton was listing Mecha designers, and I thought this was one worth talking about because I bored everyone to tears the other night talking about headgear, which was old Shiro's lot.
Oh yes.
But it's interesting that we don't talk about mech designers as much as I feel we should. Not you. I mean, us over here. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I multiple versions of myself here. Matt was listing Shoji Wakami. Soji
Kawamori.
Thank you.
So this guy, the guy who designed this.
Yes. Who did work on Armored Core.
Yes.
Junja Ishiga. The person who did Xenogears.
Junya Ishigaki. Yeah, yes. No, he's lovely. He's absolutely lovely.
I actually want to make a blanket apology to yourself, Ollie, and everybody. I'm terrible with pronunciations as a general rule.
Don't worry.
I mean no insults by them.
They're not going to be upset. They're just going to be flattered that people are talking about them. So, but no, I mean, a lot of the headgear guys, the main guy for that is Yutaka Izubuchi, who is did all the Pat Labor designs, and he is a god.
Yes.
And the thing is that I love about him is he does industrial mecha really well, and he also does fantasy mecha really well, which is two completely polar opposite things. So he's by far and away, he's probably my favorite mecha designer, or one of my favorite mecha designers. The High New Gundam, which I will say is my favorite Gundam, that is a Yutaka Izubuchi design. I love the Nightingale, which is bonkers, and that's an Izubuchi design.
Why can't I get a Nightingale kit? I've got the SD one. I can't find a Nightingale kit. I've got it.
They're really difficult, even in Japan, to get hold of. So I actually bought the Robot Damashi toy of that, which was a limited edition thing, and that is amazing. And Izubuchi actually worked on that toy to make sure the coloring was all right. So that's another thing is a lot of the biggest, most popular designs at the moment are happen to be Izubuchi's, especially with the toys. With Dunbine, a lot of the biggest selling Dunbine toys are all his designs. I'm just putting these toys away because I'm just fiddling with that. Actually, but I'll just show you something. I got something big and crazy, which I should probably. I ordered this a year ago.
Yeah, no.
It only arrived yesterday.
We're here to talk about giant robot-y stuff. And
So that is the Genesis Gal Geiger design. Okay, so they've released a bunch of toys of this. And this is the last of the Brave Mecha. And this is the one from Gal Geiger Final. And this is a collaboration between Sentinel, which is a really great toy company, and another company called Amakuni, which does girly figures. But they also, it could only be ordered online from Hobby Japan, which is the hobby magazine, but they have an online shop. So I had to order this a year ago, and it only arrived today. But it's got lights, it's full of die cast. The detailing is insane.
I do not think
this is one of my.
I do not think this call is doing the figure justice, but feckin' yo.
Yeah, no, it's the detailing is bonkers. Yeah, and this is crazily awesome. So I got this recently. It's got all the detailing on the back and everything. So, but it's like it's gorgeous. I mean, and it's massive as well, as you can see. It's huge. But no, I love sort of toys, and I love Chogokin specifically, which are the kind of the die-cast ones. So,
actually, so Moose had a really good question, which I think is really good for this conversation. So,
sorry.
No. Dude, we're here to chat mechs. We're here to chat like about their awesomeness, about their industry impact. Like this conversation goes wherever the bloody hell we want it. It's just Moose had a really good question about the concept of fantasy mechs. Like, where does that line come into it? In your opinion?
So I think, well, I mean, you could argue that things like Raideen, which is like an early super robot anime, is kind of fantasy-ish. But the one that I kind of like, I think is the touchstone one that I think a lot of people kind of resonate with is Aura Battler Dumbine. And that is actually, so, I mean, you know about the term in anime called isekai?
Yes.
Have you heard that? Yeah. So isekai really kind of kicked off properly in a big popular way with Dumbine. That was like the first proper isekai anime where a Japanese motocross racer is transported to the mythical land of Beistenwell, and he's put inside these kind of mecha that are built from the carcasses of giant insects, and he uses his soul or his aura to pilot them. So I'll show you. I mean, I've got a whole bunch of them.
Pull that out, just because Varbles was quickly asking.
So this is the Dumbine, and as you can see, it kind of looks like a beetle. It's got wings and everything, and these are unbelievably. I mean, this is really new. This toy.
Oh, nice.
And so this isn't like. I mean, the design is from the 80s, but so the original design was by Kazutaka Miyatake, who is one of the original founders of Studio Nue, who worked on Macross. A lot of the mecha in Battletech, so the Destroids from Macross, like the Warhammer battle mech. I think that's the Tomahawk. But anyway, that is designed by Kazutaka Miyatake, so the guy who designed this.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's great.
Yeah. Sorry, just very quickly. So Varbles, the term isekai, shortened down, is kind of transported to another world. Any story where the protagonist is suddenly thrown into another world or reborn into another world or what have you.
Yeah. So basically, you're transported to. It's like an alternate reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And Matt, you're on point in chat here. Matt's just like, Dunbine is best isekai fact. And was on the Fancy Mecca was listing Dunbine as you were going to get the figure, which is fucking glorious. I'm going to steal Matt's...
Talking about...
go for it.
Izabuchi. So this is... Okay, so Izabuchi actually worked on some of the mecha designs in Dunbine towards the end of the series. Now, this is called the Bellvine, and weirdly, it was never animated. It's only ever been in an art book that was released in the 80s. And this is a full-on Izabuchi. So you can see it's a lot more organic looking.
Yeah.
And this sold like crazy. And this was like a web shop only release. And they had to like do 3 or 4 rounds of it because it was so popular. So the other one they did of this, which is the Zwalf, which is this enormous bat-looking, aura battler, which is huge with this giant wingspan. That's an Izabuchi design as well. So Izabuchi is a legend. He's an amazing, amazing guy. He's also a genuinely brilliant artist who does like oil painting, and he's really talented. So he's also a fantastic anime director. So he's just a lovely, lovely guy too.
That's way cool.
So anyway, sorry.
No, I was only going to add that I'm going to steal Matt's term of Lemmy tier for top tier creatives, which I'll assume means Lemmy from Motorhead, which I choose to remember that way. Okay. Wait, no, it dropped out of my head again. Wow, I'm on form today. God.
That's all right, don't worry, it's fine. No, it's not all right. You've been busy all day, so I'm now trying to stupidly put... Is that how it works? Oh, okay.
Well, it's like your very early morning, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, it's about 9 a.m. here, so I'm kind of caffeinated, and that's about it, really. So I'm not really human at this point of the day. So, I'm a real like old school. Like I love like really classic mecha designs, but there are a lot of like modern mecha designers who I think are really interesting. So Eiichi Shimizu, who's the guy who did the designs for Line Barrel, those are amazing. He's an amazing. The guys that wrote that manga are amazing. The anime's a bit of a flaky one, but the series for that is amazing. Okay. And then you've got and then Junji Okubo, who I love to bits. I think he's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So and it's kind of weird as well seeing all of the the Hathaway's Flash designs coming. Actually, I'll just because you've got the Penelope behind you. I've got the Penelope here, which is a Robot Damashi one. But it's kind of it's a bit of a difficult one for me to pull out from the. So I'll pull out the. So this is my C Gundam. There we go.
Okay, very styling.
So that is the Penelope. So the late UC timeline Gundams. This is actually one of the ones I main with in Gundam Extreme versus Maxi Boost On. This is a really good unit to use, especially for if you're starting out with the game. Because of the way that because it uses funnel missiles, which are basically
keep talking to these lovely people. I'm gonna grab the I've dubbed mine Murder Goose, but I'm gonna grab the Hathaway.
It is yeah. So that's the Penelope is the Kasei Gundam. So this is kind of complicated. So the Kasei Gundam and the Penelope are both based on the Odysseus Gundam, and the Penelope has this huge like body over it, which is called the full flight unit. But the Kasei, because it's developed a little bit later, it's all inbuilt into the unit itself. So the Minovsky flight system, which is basically how it travels incredibly fast. Yeah, there we go.
No, we're okay. Nearly beefed it there. So, look at this big Murder Goose. Named Murder Goose because it has a goose-like face here.
Yeah. I've got the... Oh, bugger it. I'll get it out.
Yeah. We'll do a show and tell. Utopia Heart. I have not shown Ollie my cup noodle Gundam yet. I wanted to just, I'm going to have something to bust out at the end,
So here is my Murder Goose.
Yay! Murder Goose twins, activate!
Activate! No, so this is the Robot Damashi Vercar Markings Plus toy. That, I think, is the high grade.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're the same scale. So this is actually 1:144 scale, which is crazy because it's enormous.
Oh, yeah. This towers over the 1/100s like it's no big deal.
And that's actually accurate because the Penelope and the Kasei Gundam, they're like 40 meters tall. They're almost what would be called mobile armors in Gundam. But yeah I mean, these I love.
As a quick aside, mobile armor refers to like big or non-standard massive units in the Gundam world. So my tiny body, tiny big Zam is technically a mobile armor.
Yes, it is. That is a mobile armor. But no, this is designed by a guy called Moriki Yasuhiro, who did a lot of really cool Super Robot anime in the 90s. One of them being Zeoryma, which is... Everyone tends to call these Zeoryma Gundams because they look very similar.
Okay.
But yeah, no, so the whole reason why they look very pointy and they've got all these kind of weird gold stuff in is because they use a Minovsky flight system, which allows them to fly very, very fast.
Yes. Also, a combination of funnel tech and missiles for essentially mind-controlled missile swarms, which I can't wait to see in full animation. Yeah. So Lord Lost and Found had a fluffy question for both of us, which was, do you have a favorite mecha series?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have a few. So my favorites probably are Aura Battler Dumbine, Blue Comet SPT Leisner, Macross, probably the original Macross, and probably the original Gundam and Dan Cougar. So that's 5.
I'm kind of a 8th MS team. Not to be that gauche person in the conversation, but the original run of Evangelion, I still love it.
That's...
Nothing else has quite captured the weight of that size of unit. And oh god, the other one dropped out of my head. God, I'm on. To be even more popular pop kid gauche, Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Oh, that's a great series though.
Yeah.
So.
But it feels like when you're talking about like VTOMs and Macross Plus as well. Sorry, I meant to add that.
Yeah.
Because well, as a huge fan of giant robots and giant robot design, like Macross Plus is all about like 3 different philosophies of 3 different styles of unit all kind of coming together.
Yeah.
Um.
Actually, give me a second. I'm running out of space to put these back down.
Yeah, by the end of this, we're both going to have desks like Gunpla high.
So here is the... Yeah, we go.
Yes!
So this is the new Bandai one, which actually, because there's like in the series, they have this thing where one of the arms fires this special cannon, which is like there for 3 seconds, and no one's ever done like a peripheral for that. But this is the only one that includes that as a as an arm weapon. Actually, and on top of that, on top of that, they had to actually get Kawamori back to figure out how it would fold and design, because it has to transform. So he actually redesigned that arm weapon so it would actually fold in and you could transform and not have a problem. So sorry.
Matt would like to let you know that he's extremely jealous. And the thing that I was going to add is that this actually kind of ties way, way back into the start of this conversation, which is like the industry of this, right? And the thing that I wanted to highlight was that how big an industry these toys, these kits are.
Yeah.
That's the thing we don't have over here. And
it's not visible.
No. Well, and the thing I felt that really highlighted it was that, friends, you can buy model kits of Gundams that are themselves just concept work, where, you know, they were just like one design in the back of like one magazine or one book, and it actually went to, to print feels a little bit reductive, but, you know, it actually got made as a kit. And with that, like those teeny tiny details, they understand that the market for that genuinely cares about that. Like, I genuinely give a heck that they installed that. That's fucking cool. And
I mean, people are really care about all the detailing and making sure it's all accurate.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and the thing I was saying about the whole points cost and the lack of a rule system, like, I love Battletech wholeheartedly. I've told my viewership this several times, but as a young mid-teen in a Dave & Buster's while visiting family, I got to do the battle pods. They had a bunch of Tesla pods.
Oh my god, those were amazing.
And guess who got a free ride? Not a free ride, I got a free go. His points refunded. Because I specifically asked, right, for the Madcat variant D with the PPCs, and they gave me a Madcat variant A with the standard loadout, and I was tiny child livid. I was livid. I was like, no. I had missiles and lasers, and I should not have had lasers. I should have had 2 PPCs and a setup. Now, here's the thing. I can't go to this level with a Madcat. There isn't a product there that I can jump into it. There is the board game, there is the tabletop game if you want to get into the RPG side, but at best I can get some little minis, and that's it. There's no market that caters to that, and it's something that I feel like that should be considered addressing, because I feel there's a market there.
There is, and it's Bandai, since Bandai Spirits has opened in the US and started selling Gunpla, the sales of that has increased exponentially month on month.
Yeah.
And it's now like available everywhere. And the Penelope and the Cassie and all the other Gundams, those are playable in Gundam Extreme versus Maxi Boost On, for example, and that's just been released. So these things are changing gradually outside of Japan.
And I think to restate for those who have just joined us, the Penelope is not in a show that you can watch right now. The show, it's from a light novel, but it's coming out in a movie later this year. The model kits are pre-selling the movie rather than the other way round.
And the novels are from the 80s and 90s. So it's not like these were widely distributed outside of Japan. So it's kind of crazy how popular this stuff is. So if anything, like the model kits are acting as the ambassador
essentially
for the movie.
Some of you may or may not know this, but like in the US, the Penelope was available in Barnes and Noble.
What?
Barnes and
That's
bloody
nuts.
Noble. Yeah, but it was like $30 more than anywhere else. So I was like, yes, but not for $110. Target stocks kits now.
No, actually, talking of Target, I actually got sent this to review. This is a Target-only exclusive. So this is a Strike Rouge Gundam from Gundam Seed? Yeah, Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny. That's only available at Target in the US.
Target?
So, in the US. That's why it's red. That's why they're selling it with the red, right? And this is only at Target.
And this isn't like with the 7-Eleven Gundams where, 7-Eleven is a known brand in Japan. Like...
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is changing, and that is to do with Bandai Spirits in the States. So a lot of these toys are made by Bandai Spirits. So everyone kind of gets confused. So Bandai, there's Red Bandai, which is generally kit for kids.
Yeah.
And then there's Bandai Spirits, which is Blue Bandai. If we say, so you can see on the thing there's like a Blue Bandai.
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
That is different from Bluefin, though, right?
Yeah. Okay. So Bluefin is the distributor. Right, so Bluefin are the people that are actually bringing all of this stuff, but they are actually owned by Bandai Spirits and Bandai. So they are like previously they were an American company that worked with Bandai, but this is why all of this stuff is now becoming. Yeah. I mean, I interviewed the two main guys at Bluefin, and they're explaining how the sales are just exploding. I mean, those guys are really nice. So Adam Newman, he's really lovely. He's worked at Bandai like forever. And then he's working at Bluefin, like overseeing that stuff. He's awesome, and those guys really care about it. And I think it really shows that the fact that it's just going everywhere, and they're actually going out of their way. Oh yeah, so this is the Gundam Universe. Sorry, so Gundam Universe is kind of like Robot Damashi, which is like this is a Gasaraki.
I can't believe you're ratting me out while I'm trying to talk to Ollie.
That's all right.
No. So my partner put in chat the amount of time in block caps, the amount of times I have to go through the Target toy aisle for Gundams, and I don't see them. I thought they were an anomaly because everyone has bought.
I didn't believe they existed.
They've bought the kits. It's only the figures that are up at the moment, like the one that Ollie's showing. So.
I thought they were an anomaly.
Did you think I just made it up?
Yeah.
Fair.
So, but yeah, just to explain, so the Robot Damashi one, they use ABS plastic, and they're a lot more. The articulation is quite complex, and they have what is called, I think they're called torsion screws, which are little metal screws that go through the joints to give them extra strength. You normally have a lot more gimmicks. So these tend to cost, $60 to $80. These are like in the $20, $30 bracket because these use compressed PVC and they have simpler joints. But what I find amazing about these ones is since they started this process with the Pacific Rim Uprising toys.
Yeah.
The detailing on these is almost as good as ABS, which is crazy good. And they're not anywhere near as expensive. And in some ways, because they're kind of simpler in terms of the sculpt, they're in some ways more anime accurate. So, but anyway, this is a Target. Anyway, I reviewed that recently, so that's why I've got it.
No, it's
because it's not available. It's not available in Japan, right? So that's only available in the US. But Bandai sent it to me to review, so yeah.
Yeah, I keep looking at obviously the Barbatus, because I'm a big fan. They got Barbatus, Death Scythe. They've got all of the greatest hits.
The Gundam Universe ones, yeah. It's like all the main units from each major series. So they've got the EZ8 from 8th MS Team coming out soon.
Yeah.
So, for example, they don't do things like the High New Gundam. So, too many. Sorry, just give me a second.
I mean, I love the High New Gundam, so I'm happy to just show it.
No, it's all falling apart.
Oh no! The funnels!
No.
The funnels!
No. It's at the High New Gundam. Here we go. So,
so cool.
Yeah, so this is like the really old. It's actually got the V-fin's a bit broken, but I've kept him because we've been brothers for so long. No, because him and I have been through a lot. I've had him on most of my work desks, so he's now come back home to be look after with all the others.
That makes me feel better.
But no, so yeah.
I had a tiny. I had an EZ8, the EZ8 figure, and a little Dominion Tank Police. Tiny tank that has travelled with me to every game dev job, so that makes me feel better.
Lovely. No, the Dominion Tank Police, those are lovely. That's a lovely design. But no, what I mean is, so this is a Mecha Robot Damashi one, and this is technically of a design from a novel. So this is the novel version of the new Gundam, and the new Gundam is, so when they do Gundam Universe, they're not going to do of toys of the spin-offs. It's it's the ones directly from the anime. So anyway, I'll put my
I know, and as much as this is an excuse for us to, show off model kits and have a good time, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It does help illustrate the grounding and the level to which, giant robot titles do in Japan. Now, the difficult part is always the interaction between environments dev-wise. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong on this one, because a lot of this is kind of old news, but one of the problems with working, of trying to work with Japanese IPs if you are a Western developer is you've got to have a Japanese office. They won't do things on the email and the never.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I've worked at. It also works the other way. So if you want to work with a Western company, or a Japanese company, you need they don't like necessarily to interface directly with, Western developers, or you normally have to kind of go through either an agent or, you have a subsidiary of your company in Japan. So also they're very old-fashioned in the way like they still use fax machines, which is kind of mind-blowing in this day and age. And yeah, it's just I mean they're getting better in terms of the technical side of things, but I mean I could go into a lot of detail about how Japanese game development differs compared to like Western game dev, but I'm not sure if people would find that overly interesting because it is.
Oh no, friends, we'd have to talk about the development differences between the US and Japanese game devs. Oh no, how horrible would that be? Well, Ollie, this doesn't have to be. I know it's a scheduling nightmare between yours and mine, but this doesn't have to be the last time we hang out.
No.
I love talking about this stuff.
No, I mean, so big thing with Japanese game dev is in the old day, everybody was kind of like a generalist, and they were all kind of coders, artists, and designers. So one of my best friends here was a game director when I worked with him, but he was a coder on all the old Neo Geo SNK, King of Fighters, 95, 96, 97, Art of Fighting, Samurai Showdown. And what I found really interesting, because compared to, so the big difference in Western development is that everyone kind of specializes. Once development gets bigger, everyone has specific, specialization. So you'll have a technical game designer, a sound designer, a combat designer, a system designer, level designer, and that's just design, audio designer. And then you have engine coder, gameplay coder, sound coder, and everything kind of splits out. And everybody works in parallel, and then the designers kind of run in between and stitch it all together.
Yeah.
That's because of the way that middleware was developed. But in Japan, historically, it was everybody was a generalist, and then one person made the decision. But the teams were quite small, so that kind of worked okay. But now, when teams are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, there are these huge bottlenecks, and so they've had to learn how. Especially now that a lot of companies now use Unreal Engine 4, they've had to learn about this specialized disciplines, and so that's one of the biggest differences. I mean, I've noticed that in the past 5-6 years since being here is when I got here, it was still pretty old school in terms of the generalist approach. You didn't really have what I would call dedicated game designers. You have planners, which is another different thing where you plan everything out, but game designs are kind of a different thing. Now it's kind of much more in line. So, but anyway, sorry.
No, you do not need to apologize. This is kind of fascinating because I've spoken to a lot of people who worked in the Japanese games industry 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's very, as I'm sure you know, it's very easy when you're not in an environment to fall back on old information. I guess more for our lovely viewership, especially when it comes to biz dev or the mechanics of making games. It can be real easy to fall back on your old knowledge and be oh well, that's they've always been made this way, which means they'll always will be, despite how quickly game development changes year in, year out.
I mean, this is one of the things that I find. Unfortunately, games aren't really. So the problem is that games aren't tech. They're kind of they're like a stepchild of toys is the best description. So toys are what I would call a rule set with no objective, like Lego. Yes. Whereas a game tends to be a rule set with an objective. A good example which contradicts that is Minecraft, which is technically what I would call a digital toy because there is no objective. But the thing with like the problem with gaming is because it is distributed in a technical field, so within consoles, computers, there is a technical element to it. And the difference between, let's say, literature, where there became a couple of hundred years ago a technical element to it where people use the printing press, but the printing press hasn't really changed. Well, it has, but it hasn't really fundamentally changed over the course of 100, 200 years.
The mechanics by which we create a book and get a book into someone's hands haven't changed.
Correct. But the way that a game is developed, so let's say how a game was developed 10 or 20 years ago is completely technically different. Yeah. And so there's a technical sort of shroud and limitation over gaming. And one of the biggest problems also, weirdly, is that now that machines are getting so much more powerful and can do so much more, the budgets of games are skyrocketing because the old ways in which games were made, if you scale that up, primarily to do with art asset creation, you need an enormous army of people working forever to make that. And the budgets then go crazy. And there are so many, I mean, in the last generation, we lost about like 120 major developers in the US alone because, it's just not sustainable. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about Unreal Engine 5 is how they're trying to conquer this technical issue with art, so to make it scalable with the tech, which everyone thought was impossible, but now they're doing, which is kind of amazing, really.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to add, again, more for viewership, because I know you know this, Ollie, but when you have a large team, it's very difficult to change things like art pipelines and production pipelines. So while the advent of new engines has been pretty rapid, and it has been possible to create good-looking games for much cheaper, if you already have a team of 200 people, getting 200 people to change the method in which they create assets and which they develop titles is nigh on impossible. So at that point, your only option is to start bulking out, to kind of brute force the problem. There have been a few teams that, through no fault of their own, have had to downscale and reevaluate. Your Double Fines, your Infogrames is a different one. The peeps that did Uplink and then ended up making Prison Architect.
Oh, Introversion.
Introversion, thank you. I always get the name
I
wrong.
love Darwinia.
It was so good. But they tried to bulk out and then imploded and then built themselves back up with a new methodology, which was fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting because with indie games or the indie scale, you get to see those problems kind of on a macro sort of. So it's much clearer to see how the problem manifests when you start scaling up. But it's the problem with like huge like budgets and things like every Assassin's Creed game has like an army of people making that, and the budget for that, and it's not just much the budget, it's also the debugging for that is an absolute nightmare. So whilst I used to work in Poland and I worked at People Can Fly, a lot of those guys also moved to CD Projekt Red. So I've been hearing all sorts of things about what happened to Cyberpunk. So I feel really sorry for those guys because it's when you have an open world game with all this emergent functionality, the debugging of that it's a Herculean, almost impossible task, and you can't rush it either. So I just feel very sad that it kind of ended up the way it did.
I wholeheartedly agree. I've actually been plugging. As someone who spends a lot of time on the weird and the bizarre indie titles, I've actually been plugging away on Cyberpunk. Is that an offer or a threat?
It's an offer.
Yes, please. I got mac and cheese. This is a great day. Mac and cheese, great guests, great conversation. Feckin' yes. No, I've been plugging away through it, and the thing that really you can feel through it is like the technical and environmental teams were rocking socks, but whoever had charge of story and narrative basically got to supersede everyone else, and the amount of bloat in that game that pertains to story and narrative that was, you can see it when you play it, that was pulling focus away from other parts. for these like custom handcrafted scenes during story beat missions that you encounter once and never again, versus the world as a whole. Yeah. Oh, sorry. On our previous conversation about the way in which teams develop, Vanderbeest just said, try to get 2 engineers to agree upon a text editor.
Yeah,
like...
right, okay. So that is also another thing is, I mean, not always, but a lot of coders, especially outside of Japan, tend to what I call, like, hold the game hostage, where they get what they like. So it's kind of like game design by proxy, that they kind of want to get the stuff that they like in the game. But anyway.
I obviously can't name any names, but I have encountered that. Yes, this is on my production docket, but I want this going in, and if you want this to come in at a timely time, then we have to come to an arrangement.
Yes. Or I'll shoot your code in the back of the head. But yeah.
I couldn't possibly find out how to fix these bugs in this particular feature that you love, but my feature.
Yes. Yeah. So but that's actually less of a problem in Japan, because the code side of it, they all understand that it's meant for, how does the game play, and they're actually all really care about it. And yeah, it's different. Oh, that's what I was going to say about my friend at SNK. What was weird about him was like half his brain was a coder and half his brain was a game designer. And I've never encountered that outside of Japan, but that's basically how these guys had to work in a kind of a generalist way. And so now that he's having to specialize in code, his experience as a game designer is actually very helpful, because he can then interface even better with the design team, and he can actually give them a lot of help, and I think because he really understands that he's not just making software, he's making a game. Yeah. And I think that's another thing that a lot of Western coders can be very... They desperately want to make clean, clever code at the expense of what you're actually trying to make work. So even if the game feels, or if the game feels and handles badly, that for them is less of an issue if the code is messy. So if the code is messy and the game handles great, that they don't like that. Whereas in Japan, it's like, no. The code is messy now, we'll fix it later, but it needs to work right. So I think that's one of the biggest differences that I've noticed, which I find quite refreshing, actually.
And also, so those of you who haven't, again, spent much time in dev environments, like, messy code doesn't equal, like, bugs and problems. It just means that the method in which it does the thing but under the hood is usually very... I've heard the term hacky thrown around.
Yes, yeah. So basically, it's the reason why it's not a problem necessarily at the beginning, but later on when you have to debug, it makes it harder. So generally what normally happens is you do messy code, then you refactor to clean it up so that you know what... Once you've figured out what you're trying to execute in the code, then you clean it up.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you don't clean it up later, then it's a problem. So there is a reason why you need to do good code or clean code. Because later on, because you've got all these different systems interacting with each other, and if you've got like a hacky piece of code, then it's like, okay, where the hell is the problem? Because we've got to fix this problem. So if you're keeping it kind of logical and clean, you can figure out where the problems are. But generally, I don't like it when coders are always like, has to be clean, perfect from the beginning. It's like, hang on a second, we've got to iterate this. So, yeah.
The user experience should be the final focus. And again, it's very easy for me to say this because I'm not dev side at the moment. I get to hang out with these lovely mother hubbards on the daily. And when I do interface with teams now, it's tiny 2-3 person teams tops. Where if you're in a team like that, it falls more into what you were talking about. You need to be a generalist. You've got to be able to produce yourself, design your project, and then make it. And if you have to put it together from hacked code, then feckin' yo.
Yeah, go for it. No, I mean, that's actually true. I mean, that's a really good thing, is that the bigger the production gets, the more distinct and separated out each of the disciplines become. Whereas on like indie games, or things like Stroke Suit Zero, I had to do audio design, system design, narrative design, game design, level design, all together. Scripting, so and that I actually kind of miss in some ways, because it's everything really. I mean, one of the games that I really enjoyed working on before Strike Suit was a game called Burn Zombie Burn, which was on the PlayStation 3. I loved working on that.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Script. No, Burn Zombie Burn's great. I love it. The PC version, it was a bit rubbish because they found some weird company to port it. But the original the original PS3 one is actually great. If you can still buy it. That's another thing about a lot of these games is like, I mean, my old PS3's died. I can't actually get it to work anymore. And all of my game saves are on the hard drive, and the hard drive is, I think it's locked to that specific PS3. And unless I can resurrect the PS3, I can't get access to all my game saves, which is nuts. Yeah. And there's a bunch of games that I worked on the PS3 that I can't ever play again. So, because they're all on that hard drive, and you can't really buy them online anymore. I don't think the store exists. But yeah,
don't get me into the keeping and restoration of games. That's a whole other topic of. Yeah. So, from your perspective, where you're sitting, like, and this might be a bit of a high-end question, and friendos. So, Ollie, I don't know how much of your time we have.
I've got about another 20 minutes or so before I get going.
So friends, if you've got any questions, we're going to do question and answers in a sec, so get them primed. So, Ollie, from your perspective, what could, like, Western developers, Western publishers, how could we either facilitate more mech games coming over, or how can we help foster more of those, as you were saying, those kind of English language region-free releases?
Yeah, I think the main thing is if there's a game like, I mean, just release the games. I mean, there are a bunch of Japanese games. I mean, at the moment, that's actually happening. There's a big shift, not only with Mecha games, but like classic, like Secret of Mana games, for example. Like we're getting Trials of Mana, right?
Yeah.
And we got the original versions and then the HD remake. And all the original Dragon Quest, like 1, 2, 3, you can actually play those. So things like that, that's really important. And I think a lot of those games just need to be made available. Whilst, I'm really happy that Demon's Souls got a, really gorgeous remake. I'd love to see a lot of the older classic Armored Core games get like that kind of, not necessarily that beautiful a remaster, but at least a
Honestly,
HD release.
Give me a PC relaunch of for answer, and I will be a happy ginger for a very long time.
Yes. So, I mean, I think really it's about releasing more new games, classic games. I think the anime side of it is really helping because there's so many classic anime now that you can get. So Dunbine's available in the US on Blu-ray. Yep. All of Gundam pretty much is available on Blu-ray.
Along with Gundam Info rotating shows on YouTube. Like,
yes,
Gundam Info has been rotating a bunch of the series. You can just watch them for no money.
Yeah.
Legally.
So, I mean, and they released, there's Giant Gorg's been released, all of Votom's is now available, Dan Cougar is now available on Blu-ray. I mean, it's all available now. I mean, there are a few things that like don't exist, like Leisner or Gal Geiger or, stuff like that, or Galliant. But, I think it's a big, there's been a big shift. Like not only in terms of classic anime, but new stuff too. So I just think it just needs to continue on. I think that would really help.
Yeah.
That would make a difference.
Okay, so friends, I promised you would do this. It's question and answer time. For some reason, I'm now from the Midlands. I don't know why I did that. Okay, so Matt Wheaton has been asking, is there a mecha anime that you feel has the same feel as Xenogears as far as like world building, storytelling? Also,
Not
Matt
really.
just came in to chat to you today. Like, Matt's been a fucking legend in chat and just came in to hang out with your good self.
I think maybe the closest would be something like Galliant-ish, like Panzerwell Galliant, because it's sort of got this medieval setting to it, but it's set in the distant future. So that kind of might fit with Xenogears, but the vibe of Xenogears is a different thing. Maybe Vifam in some ways, or... Yeah, because there's like weird archaeological element to, I think it's probably Galliant maybe, but yeah, Xenogears is its own thing, so I'm not sure about that. Sorry.
Okay. Immortal Len wanted to ask, with the recent popularity of tactics games in the West, do you think we'll ever get another Super Robot Tenzin officially in North America?
I think we're still going to get the English localized versions released in Asia, but because of the licensing, I think it's just too complicated for them to release a main Super Robot Wars game outside of Japan. So it doesn't matter though, because you can still import it in English, so it doesn't. You're not limited. It's on Switch, it's on PlayStation 4, it's on PC. So yeah.
Oh no, Varbles was just wanting to point out something that we've discussed here a lot, which is there's so many classic games from the cartridge era that are core to giant robots that outside of, let's be perfectly honest, outside of piracy, one cannot access, and certainly can't access in the English language. Which is, I was musing about this the other morning. If I had stupid money, I would do what Night Dive Studios has been doing with old PC games for old cartridge era giant robot games. Just run around, find out who's got the IP, bloody buy it, reskin it for Steam, and just get it out there forever, Yeah.
No, I think that would be really helpful. There are so many games that deserve that kind of, that re-release, really.
Clank's got a spicy one. Okay, so Clank Crush was asking, I've heard that the mecha genre originally grappled with the aftermath of World War II's mechanized warfare. Are these themes still relevant today?
Kind of, yes, that's partly true. I think he's probably referencing something called Tetsujin Niju Hachigo, which is technically the first mecha anime. Because mecha have to be controlled, and that was actually meant as originally a weapon for use in the World War II, but it was then reappropriated for peacetime, law, keeping processes. But I think in more modern times, no, you don't really get that reference. So it's not really, it doesn't really come up in the same way. I think of the time, the things that kind of come up more now, you mentioned your love of Evangelion. Evangelion, that is much more of a reference to things like classic tokusatsu shows like Ultraman than anything to do with, real world events.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, I'm going to read this out, but I want Moose to know I read this out begrudgingly. Rhymes with Moose asks, given your capacity as a mech expert, have you ever considered printing business cards that identify yourself as a mechspert?
No.
Moose, you're a criminal.
No, I don't. I don't ever. So for one, I don't ever call myself an expert. And generally, whenever I talk about mecha, I call them mecha. I don't call them mechs. But yeah, no. Yeah, I don't. You were mentioning that I'm somehow the go-to guy. I don't really feel that I'm the go-to guy. I just really love this stuff, and I just find it fascinating. And to be honest, I'm always learning huge amounts of new things every day, because the more I interact with people who've made stuff, the more I learn about how it really happened and how these things are actually designed. So I think it's the reason why it's so interesting is because the ride never ends. It's just always interesting.
Yep. Caffeine would like to ask. Caffeine has two burning questions. Okay. Firstly, your favorite alcoholic drink, if you have one.
Gin.
I knew we'd be friends.
I'm a gin guy. I love gin. Anyway, yeah.
And B, okay, the Titans from Warhammer 40,000. Would you consider those mechs, mobile armor, or neither?
I would consider them mecha. I would consider the Space Marines, which I have one.
Oh, did you get one of the sweet...
Space...
Oh, those are so cool!
And this is an action figure, and these are power armor. So,
yeah. Premium Bandai dangled those in front of me like crispy biscuits.
Crispy biscuits.
Premium Bandai and the crispy biscuits.
Yeah, the crispy biscuits. But yeah, I think those would be mecha, definitely the Titans.
Okay, friends, if you have any more quick fire questions, I just need to think about how I'm going to get back at Moose with that terrible pun.
And this is the original Starship Troopers power armor from the 80s. So this is actually the start of what I would call real robot mecha.
Okay.
And this was designed by... so when they released Starship Troopers, the novel, in Japanese in the 70s, they hired two of the guys from Studio Nue to design what they thought the power armor would look like for the cover art. And Kazutaka Miyatake and Naoyuki Kato designed this.
It's awesome.
And this was kind of the precursor to Gundam, because these guys were hired to do the original designs on Gundam, and then those were regarded as being too industrial, too realistic. So Okawara came in and made them more samurai-like.
Okay.
But interestingly, this design, like with the visor and everything, that ended up in Gundam as the gun cannon and the GMs, and the GMs are the basis for the Master Chief in Halo. Specifically,
Full circle.
there's actually so this is, I've got it here, but this is another Izubuchi design.
Actually,
so
very quickly, just to plug your work, Ollie did an incredible article recently about the influences of mecha anime and stuff on specifically Halo. It is a great read. I will find the link in a second.
Yes. No, so I'm actually bringing that up because this is the GM Sniper Mark II.
Yeah.
Or GM Sniper 2. And this was then updated by another designer to be an all-green version called the GM Spartan. And the GM Spartan is basically identical to the Master Chief, the original Master Chief. And the original concept designer at Bungie was a big Gundam fan. So, and they have mentioned this a few times that they're big fans of Gundam. So I do actually, it's really uncanny how similar they are. So, but yeah, but no, I mean, this is where that visor theme comes from. So anyway,
it's a shame those didn't get brought over to like the later designs, but the movie of Starship Troopers kind of muddied the water on those ones.
Yeah, but they didn't use any of the power armor in the big movies.
They brought it in for the cartoons and later. It would have been great, but okay, don't get me started on Starship Troopers the movie, because I can, especially if Jin's involved, I can talk about that to the break of dawn.
Yeah.
But no, so friends, if you have any giant robot questions for Ollie before we have to send him on his way.
Yeah, before I have to reassemble all my toys because I've just made them mess.
I'm sorry.
It's just, I've just pulled them out and like all these toys are like, so.
You might have to just do a little Twitter picture for us, just to show us the aftermath from the other side.
Oh no! I mean, yeah, before and after. Yeah.
Oh, Len wanted to ask a good entry-level mecha anime for those still relatively new to the genre, non-Gundam, a non-Gundam. Now, I'd go with Eureka 7, but I don't know about your good self.
That's a good one. That's a really good one actually. Eureka 7's a really interesting anime to start with.
Right?
Non-Gundam. That's really interesting. Ooh, that's what I'm gonna have to really non-Gundam.
Right. I mean, I'm used to just using like War in the Pocket, 8th MS Team.
Yeah. Right.
Thunderbolt or Iron Blooded Orphans if someone can do 2 seasons of a thing.
Macross Plus.
Macross Plus.
That's a really good one.
It's human level drama with cracking mech designs, like.
And Bryan Cranston voicing one of the characters, unbelievably or not.
What?
So Isamu, the guy who pilots the YF-19, that's voiced by Bryan Cranston back when he was known as Lee Stone. So that was his pseudonym. He wasn't credited as Bryan Cranston. But yeah, Bryan Cranston in Macross Plus.
So you just gotta blow everybody's mind just a little bit before you just roll that grenade on the way out.
Yeah.
Cool. That changes a lot.
No, I think Macross Plus is a really good one to start with. What else? That's a tricky one. That's a very tricky one. Giant Robo. That's another really great anime to watch. That's more of a robot anime technically, but that's a really great. I mean, that's kind of what I would call a soft entry because it's much more of a kind of a retro starting input. And that's readily available. Giant Robo's great. It's also quite short. So, I mean, normally I recommend short series. But yeah, like you say, for Gundam, I would do exactly the same. It's 0080, maybe 0083, or 8th MS Team, basically the OVAs. Weirdly, I watched Char's Counter Attack as the first entry, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Oh, in the UK, we were very limited to our availability, so I saw.
It's great that I can talk to you about that because it's like a real problem.
Because we got Gundam Wing on what was it? On
eventually.
one of them. God, I'm trying to remember which cable channel it was, which Sky channel it was that got Gundam Wing. And the thing was, I saw a lot of it out of order and went, this is just some high school drama bollocks. Being an elitist jerk of a child, you know. And it wasn't until...
Where are my PPCs? Where
right?
are my PPCs?
No, it wasn't until later on where I started getting introduced to... It wasn't until I got introduced to a lot of other stuff. And then for Gundam specifically, I was much later that I got into it because I just kind of gone, psh, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to be all about them Gundams at all. Nah, psh, Gundam, who'd be all about that?
Yeah, I know.
Many years later.
Yes, many years later. Actually, another one I think would be good, Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann's a good one to start with. But that's like a very specific super robot type. So if you don't mind like older animation, I would also recommend Dumbine. Because that's a standalone, self-contained series. The animation is old school, but the story's fantastic.
Yeah.
So are we good?
Okay. This is a very specific one to close out from Chronofire. But Chronofire's asking, Super Robot Wars, T, V, or X?
I would probably say T because I've played about 500 hours on that. I've finished it about 16 times now because you get upgrades each time. So I actually think I prefer X in terms of the roster, as in the available Mecca, and I much prefer the other Mazingas that they have in X. But T, I mean, is amazing. It's got Dumbine, it's got the High New Gundam, it's got the Nightingale, it's got G Gundam, which is bonkers.
Yes.
It's also got Nadesco, which I love. It's got Cowboy Bebop, which is bonkers, and it's also got Gal Geiger, which is another favorite Super Robot Wars. Super Robots. It has Votoms, which I love as well.
Yeah.
I think T. If you've not played any of the new Super Robot Wars games, just go straight into T, because that has got most of the quality of life improvements over V and X.
Oh, for those that don't know,
because each one they add more. Yeah.
For those that don't know, what's T available on?
Switch, PC, PlayStation 4. I think not PS Vita, but it's available on Switch. Available in English on Switch and on PC in English. And on PS4 in English. So I personally prefer the Switch version because the Super Robot Wars games started as handheld games on the Game Boy back in 1991. So like the DNA of the series is kind of a handheld tactical RPG. So it feels right for me on the Switch. So it's also just I can play it anywhere, which I love. So.
Well, so I mean, I don't want to usher you out. I don't have to be anywhere, but I do want to say, dude, thank you for coming on today.
No worries.
We solved all the problems that I wanted to pose to you in the first 10 minutes. So this did just turn out to a glorious Mecha geek out session, which I'm totally for.
Excellent. It was lovely, and let's do it again soon. There's lots of new stuff coming out, so we can talk about all that really.
Hells yeah, I will bug you on email for a one next month. But there was one last thing that I had to show you. This is a bit of a flex, but this is Mecca Noodle Gundam.
That's the actual plamo. That's the one where you build it and it's got the thing inside. Oh yeah, I know.
Guess who?
I can't believe they did a model kit of
it's
that.
So
it's
good.
The most random thing ever.
Dude, it's also one of the most fun I've built in a while. But I am of the level where I didn't want to use the stickers, so I did spend hours inking the instructions and the nutritional value in the back. Hours scrubbing off the leftover ink. Totally worth it.
That's amazing. Oh, fantastic. I love that.
Oh, and Bismarck, I did show Ollie the Sega Saturn earlier, because Ollie mentioned Virtua On.
Yeah, talking of Virtual On, so this is my Temjin figure, and he's got a Saturn on the back. So
I knew I wasn't going to win, but damn!
No, but that's got the Saturn on the back. So yeah, this is. By the way, Virtual Online main as Temjin. So if you ever see me online, that's another thing. I just want to say the PlayStation 4 Masterpiece Collection for Virtual On works on the PlayStation 5 and supports the new Tanita Twin Sticks, which cost me $600. It's really painful that was, but I was really upset because I was worried that it wouldn't work on the PlayStation 5 because it was for the PS4, but it works, so I don't feel completely stupid. So anyway.
I mean, that's fair. In my heart of hearts, I'm still waiting for some peripheral company to do a USB version of the Steel Battalion controller. That's what I'm holding out my heart for.
Yeah.
One day.
No, my Steel Battalion controller's sort of down there. But yeah, it's really frustrating that the only way you can really play that game is to buy an original Xbox. And
I'm kind of spoiled because we have PAX West up the road, and so there's a dedicated setup each year to Steel Battalion. Actually, a couple of people that were hanging with us have worked on and around that, and are lovely.
Oh, fantastic!
So
yeah, no, I mean, I'll let Junji know about that because he was one of the guys. So he not only designed all the mecha in Steel Battalion, he also designed how the controller would work and how the cockpit would work.
So it's Vulcanor down in chat is one of the people that runs that at PAX.
Cool.
So
that's fantastic. I think you are doing God's work. So. As far as I'm concerned, but that game is fantastic. I mean, I would say it's almost worth. I mean, to be honest, that's what I actually bought my Xbox for when it came out originally, because I was living in Japan at the time then, and that's what I didn't buy it for Halo. I bought it to play Steel Battalion. So, and I never regretted it. It's an amazing, amazing game.
It's a feckin' experience. So, well, yeah. If that gentleman ever wants to come to a PAX West and get the giant robot star treatment, feckin' yo.
Yeah, no, I'll tell Junji about that. He'd love to know about that. So, but anyway.
Yes, Ollie, just once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all. Thanks for having me.
I've got to remember. Hang on, I'm gonna just mess with the screen just for a second.
No worries.
So, friends, if you want to see more of Ollie's work, probably the quickest way to find all of it is over on Twitter, which I have linked down in chat. Ollie does a bunch of great articles for a bunch of different places, so he's absolutely worth following. I thought that's the quickest thing I can point people to of yours.
No. Twitter's fine because, I mean, I post most of my stuff on there. So, I mean, I write for Forbes, but most of my links are on there. I do a bunch of interviews and, basically whenever I do something, I tend to post it on Twitter. So that's the best way to follow me, really. Okay,
so just, again, Ollie, thank you so much for your time, dude.
No worries, and thanks for having me. It was lovely.
Right. So, to be continued.
I'll see you soon. Bye.
Alrighty, now you just have a weird close-up of my shoulder. Hang on, if I move over here. And Murder Goose. Yes, hello, it is me, Gundam Penelope. You might know me as Murder Goose. I'm going to be on Will's show now that, you know what? I don't want to keep doing that skit because I'm going to feckin' break it. So bear with me just a second, dear friends. So leave that. And we're going to go over to here. Close that down. This might work, or it might break. Oh, Lord Lost is like, the real interview we all came for. Hey! I didn't break it! But no, that was feckin' grand. Thank you all for the cracking questions, and just for lovely Mother Hubbards. Famous Success, I thought that was the Nug voice. Look, I've only got so many voices. We have more characters here than I have voices for. Friends, do you want to just chat giant robots for a little bit longer? I'm not quite ready to call it an evening just yet, but I am busting for the loo. So, do you want to just hang out and chat about giant robots for a little bit longer before we roll credits and whatnot? Or is that a horrible idea that nobody wants? Well, I tell you what, either way, I'm going to nip to the bathroom very briefly, but I'll be back with you all in just a second. Regardless of whether we natter robots to the break of dawn or otherwise. It helps if I...